Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Thundermo. Welcome to my top 10 most anticipated, most excited about review of spoilers from the upcoming set, Ravinca Allegiance. So the first card we're going to talk about is going to be Frilled Mystic. It is a 4-mana 3/2 with flash that says when it enters the battlefield, you may counter target spell. So it costs green, blue, which is a very restrictive mana cost. However, the payoff for this card is massive. First of all, we're getting Breeding Pool in this set, so the mana is going to be a little bit better for the green-blue base decks. Not to mention the fact that we already have the other Shocklands, so we're also getting Stomping Grounds here. So Temur is immediately playable. This is immediately playable in Sultai and any other combination of green-blue X you'd like to include. All of the lands are now unlocked. We have all of the check lands and all of the shocks. But where this card is going to shine is going to be in one of those tempo decks. So you're looking at potentially a Simic deck coming out of this this set. But this card, it's really important to talk about how powerful this effect is. So this is effectively a 2-for-1 that is going to ruin some people. Being able to add a creature to your battlefield at instant speed, first of all, is a blowout in combat. Not to mention the fact that if you are able to counter a spell with this, taking full advantage and getting the full 2-for-1, countering a spell and adding to your board presence is massive. Mystic Snake has done this in the past. This is a callback to Mystic Snake. This is a very, very powerful card that will catch a lot of players off guard initially and will be something that once you get them with, they will play around and be scared of going into games 2 and 3 if you're main decking these. This is what a tempo card should be, and if there were more cards like this, the tempo archetype would be insane. I'm very, very excited to fit this into a Temur deck, and you'll note that some of the cards on this list will have a theme, maybe just 1 or 2 colors in common going through the list. But this card seriously is a powerhouse and not to be underestimated. You will see a lot of this in the upcoming format, especially if there is a tempo mid-range list, probably looking at Temur colors, which would be red, green, and blue. Going forward, that will probably surprise a lot of players with some of the cards that have been released in this most recent set. And so my next card is actually going to be Rhythm of the Wild. So this is an enchantment for 1 red and a green, so 3 mana in total. And it says creatures you control can't be countered. And additionally, non-token creatures you control have Riot, which means they enter the battlefield with your choice of either a +1/+1 counter or haste. So this card is something I'm very, very excited about for 2 reasons. It helps the green decks, traditionally the green mid-range lists, counter their 2 biggest weaknesses in the control matchup. The green decks typically struggle in the control matchup. You'll note, if you think about the decks right now, like mono green exists, but it struggles very, very hard against the Jeskai decks that exist, and any other deck that's really playing some sort of board wipe. Star of Extinction is something that is going around as well, but primarily what I'm thinking about is the Jeskai matchup that's playing Cleansing Nova and Settle the Wreckage, right? These are 2 huge banes for the creature-based decks, right? Sweeping your board is not particularly easy to reload from, especially after you've committed your Bandit Orcs and your big threat, right? You've given them enough reason to wipe the board that is sometimes difficult to rebuild after you go all in. And additionally, in addition to like board wipes being a problem, sometimes it feels impossible to resolve spells against your opponents that are playing the control. So you'll play your Mana Dork on turn 1, you'll go to cast your Jade Light on turn 2, and they'll syncopate it, and you'll feel behind on the back foot, and then you'll go to cast your next spell, and they have 3 mana, they'll sabotage it, right? Or they'll ionize it, or they'll syncopate it again, or they'll have Essence Scatter, and now they have Quench, right? So there's like a million different counter spells that exist in the current format, and they're getting even more. And so it can feel sometimes impossible to resolve, specifically creature spells, against your control opponents. This alleviates that with, as soon as it resolves, creature spells you control can't be countered. That's a huge boon for the green decks against the control decks. Taking away that weakness, being able to resolve all of your spells, all of your creature spells, that is insane. I cannot overstate how powerful that is against your control opponent. Making their hand look like blanks and forcing them to have removal is very, very good. And additionally, like talking about previously, so when they wipe your board's clear, you have to play out your creature, it has Summoning Sickness, and you're no longer, you have to take your foot off the pedal, right? And so you're not applying pressure, then your opponent gets to untap, and then they resolve their threat. They can, you know, use a single target removal spell, like a sorcery speed removal spell, and keep your board clear. Like once they're in 1-for-1 territory, the control deck usually has the upper hand. Riot being a keyword is on this enchantment, and giving it to all of your creatures that are going to resolve is huge, because if your creature has haste, you can give it a +1/+1 counter. It can hit even harder. Or if it doesn't have haste and it already hits hard, if it doesn't have haste and it already hits hard, you can give it haste. Thinking about Carnage Tyrant, like that's going to resolve anyways, but that's maybe a poor example. But if you think about cards like your Crisis, your Jade Lights, giving your any creature you could resolve immediately has haste or a +1/+1 counter, and that's huge. Like I said, so not only are your creatures going to resolve, and you're going to be blanking a lot of your opponent's counter spells, but you're also going to be able to hit your opponent very, very quickly from resolving after they resolve their board wipes. So this card really is a huge bane for control decks going forward, I think. And because of that, I'm very, very excited to play 2, maybe 3 copies of this in my sideboard. I don't know if this has best of 1 applications. I'm not sure if this is something that I would play in best of 1, thinking about Arena. But this card is huge for green-red mid-range lists in the best of 3 format. And that's extremely exciting, and that's why it's on this list for me. So number 8 on our list is going to be End-Raze Forerunners. And this card is admittedly just something that I'm particularly fond of. I don't think this is particularly competitive, but it's something that I'm going to try to make work. I am a Timmy at heart. I love playing big dumb creatures, and making any big dumb creature that can make my other creatures big dumb creatures is something I'm immediately attracted to and very, very excited about. So End-Raze Forerunners is 5 green, so 8 mana in total for a boar that has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. And when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2. They gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. Additionally, this card's a 7/7, right? So you are paying for an overrun effect and a 7/7 that has haste, effectively, in addition to Vigilance. So it costing 8 mana is a huge drawback, and I think that's what keeps it out of being hyper-competitive and out of the Tier 1 decks. Potentially, we're going to talk about another card a little bit later that might be able to make this playable, but we'll see. But this card, again, is really just a callback. For me, when I first started playing Magic, the 4-mana Garruk Wildspeaker was one of the first Planeswalkers I ever got my hands on, back when Lorwyn came out, and it upticked and untapped 2 mana, and then you immediately downticked it to add Overrun to your board and kill your opponents. And that's often what happened when I first started playing. I was just overrunning my opponents as quickly as possible to pressure their life total and end the game. And so I sort of have grown up and been very fond of Overrun. We haven't seen a playable Overrun in a while. There was that Eldrazi, I think, in the Shadows over Innistrad format that had Emerge, and it did something similar to this, but it wasn't very playable. I did try that card back then, but it wasn't very playable. This card potentially has a legitimate shot because there is a bit of ramp in the format right now. And like I said, there's going to be a card on this list we'll talk about in the future that will sort of, you'll see, adds a bunch of mana for meeting a very easy piece of criteria to meet. But so this card is mainly on the list just for nostalgia throwbacks. Reminds me of Craterhoof. I wish it's not quite Craterhoof, but I wish it was. And my inner Timmy would not let me keep it from the list. So like I said, overall probably not very competitive, but definitely a lot of fun if you do get to resolve it. And yeah, so that's why this is on the list. So moving on from the End-Raze Forerunners, we have Cinder Vines up next here. This is another one of those cards that I think really helps the green-red decks, specifically the green-red mid-range lists, in their control matchup. And that's why it's on this list here. So the enchantment itself for green-red says, whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Cinder Vines deals 1 damage to that player. Additionally, it has the effect for 1 of any color, sacrifice Cinder Vines, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and Cinder Vines deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. So you've got the Destructive Revelry effect stapled to an enchantment that punishes your opponent for playing non-creature spells. It's important to note that there are currently at least 3 decks I can think of. They're all variations on the same deck, mind you, that are like the Fog deck. There is the Esper, like, gain life deck that is casting like Revitalize or Rejuvenation, Ritual of Rejuvenation, just to sort of buy time until they can wipe your board and then and then eventually resolve a bunch of Nexus of Fates, and then kill you with Chromium, and then there's like the Jeskai version of that, right? So these 3 decks are playing almost no creatures, maybe 1 or 2, and very, very few win cons. So all of the spells that they're going to be casting are going to most likely be non-creatures, meaning every single spell that they cast deals damage to them. That adds up over the course of several turns, especially with some of these decks casting 3, 4, 5 spells in a turn to sort of chain off and flip their Primal Amulets, to sort of chain off to find spells that they need, especially just like chaining off Nexus of Fates. Like casting a Nexus of Fates deals 1 damage to you. That can add up if you get some chip damage in, right? Especially because we're moving into a Shockland format, it's not unreasonable for your opponent to have shocked themselves once or twice. All of these little nickel and diming sort of adds up to you being able to punish your opponent for executing their game plan. And these Punisher cards are traditionally very good out of the sideboards for these green-red mid-range lists. So for that reason, I think, again, you'll note that I'm sort of building an archetype here. I'm working towards a deck that I've got in mind that might be something I'm working on, and that is pretty cool and pretty exciting for me in the new format. And that's why I think Cinder Vines deserves a spot on this list. So, yeah, I think this card's great. I think you're going to see it in sideboards, again, with Rhythm as well. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch against the control decks that's really going to push, I think, green-red mid-range into the spotlight for at least a little bit. But from Cinder Vines, we're going to move over to Prime Speaker Vanafar. This is going to be one of my pet cards. Like, I'm really excited about this card. I think a lot of people are excited about this card because we have Birthing Pod back in the format. If you're not familiar with what Birthing Pod is, it was a 4-mana artifact that essentially had Prime Speaker Vanafar's effect. So this is a 2/4 creature for 4 mana, 2 green-blue. It's a legendary elf ooze wizard. Ooze wizard is kind of weird, but it is a wizard. So again, it has it unlocks the wizard retorts, and I'm not sure wizard lightning would be relevant for this deck, but it does unlock. That's worth noting. That the creature type is relevant. But the effect on the card that is very, very interesting. You see a paragraph of text there. It says, sacrifice another creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability anytime you could a sorcery. That is a lot of text to say that you can turn your Llanowar Elf into a Branchwalker. You can turn your Branchwalker into a Jade Light. You can turn your Jade Light into insert 4-drop into a Chupacabra. You can turn your Chupacabra into a Regisaur Alpha. You can turn your Regisaur Alpha into a Carnage Tyrant. You can turn your Carnage Tyrant into, I don't know. I don't even know what 7-drop creature we're playing. But it's really interesting that you can just fetch up all these creatures and they enter the battlefield. They're not cast. They're just put into play. And if you can untap Prime Speaker's Vanafar, and I think there are several cards that do untap permanents or creatures in the format, you can really do some wacky things with this. And now, I mean, you're going to look to people like Savern Olive, almost certainly is going to be working on some sort of infinite combo, wombo, put a bunch of dudes into play, and like go off with Vanafar, untapping it, putting a bunch of weird things in play, and then giving all of them haste with like heroic reinforcements, and then just killing your opponent, right? There's going to be something weird that somebody does. I don't know who's going to do it, but I'm really excited to see the deck that they do, that somebody does create with this. I'm working on something with it. It's really, really cool. Like I said, untap effects are something I'm focusing on. There's one common that was printed that puts I think it's +1/+1 counter on something and untaps it, or gives it +1/+1 and untaps it from the new set from Ravinca Allegiance. And there's also like I think like the giant growth effect that we had that has kicker untaps from Dominaria. There are a few untap effects, not many, but if you can work them into a deck with Prime Speaker Vanafar and you're able to just pump out like upgrade a 2-drop to a 4-drop in one turn, or upgrade a 4-drop to a 6-drop in one turn while getting like a 5-drop ETB effect. This can be very, very fun, very, very flashy, and very, very toolboxy. Like toolbox decks are very, very interesting. They haven't really existed for a while just because there aren't really efficient ways to tutor for them, and this is an efficient way to tutor for creatures if you can protect this. This being in green and blue gives it dive down protection, gives it like pump protection, and it's also just a 2/4 body, which is very relevant. It doesn't die to lightning strike, it doesn't die to wizard lightning, it doesn't die to cast down, which is pretty relevant. It does get contempt, and it does get lava coiled, and those are playable removal spells right now. But I don't think dies to Doomblade is a relevant excuse or relevant reason to not play a creature that is potentially a very, very powerful effect. So this card made it on the list purely for meme combo value, or like I'm really excited to see what somebody does with this basically. So please, if you have a sick idea for this, put it in the comments below. I need to see lists. I need to see ideas for this card. I'm really excited. This is one of those like cards that I just want to work with my community on, work with the internet on, and see like what like weird wacky brews you can come up with to make this as efficient and effective and like fun as possible. And that's why this card's on the list, because it's wacky and because it's interesting and because I need somebody to break this. So I have to tell you guys about it. So somebody break this for me, please. I am so excited to play with this card. So at the halfway point for our list, we have Incubation Druid. So this card is very interesting. So it's a 2-mana mana dork, 1 and a green for an elf druid. Elf is a relevant creature type potentially. And it says add 1 mana of any mana type that a land you control could produce. If Incubation Druid has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. And then it also has the adaptability for 3 green, adapt 3. So put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. So it's got a way to self-enable its a mana producing effect. But if you can put 1 counter on it, it's good to go. And it adds 3 mana, which is huge. And it's a 0/2. Now, the 0/2 is not an impressive stats, right? It's fragile. It's fragile. But being able to put that +1/+1 counter on it, and there are people have been talking about New Horizons being a way to enable this. I don't think that's the worst way to enable it. If you play New Horizons on turn 3, so you play this on turn 2, just no, you don't even ramp with your Llanowar Elf. Turn 1, nothing. Turn 2, Incubation Druid. If it doesn't die, then you get to untap New Horizons, put the +1/+1 counter on the Incubation Druid, and then all of a sudden you're producing 3 mana, and you have a land that can produce any type of mana, because New Horizons allows that land to produce any color. So then you're all of a sudden you're paying 3 green and putting a Steel Leaf into play, or putting a Jade Light Ranger into play, or putting whatever into play. An extra 3 mana is insane for essentially free. That's really great. Not to mention, if you untap with this, at that point it would be a 1/3. If you untap with this, then you have 8 mana, assuming you make your land drop on turn 4. That's a lot of mana. A lot of mana. That's big pig mana, everybody. That's when you're dropping the End-Raise Forerunners and just bonking your opponent for 7 on turn 4 with Vigilant Haste, Hasty Pig. That's exciting. So this is that card that I was alluding to that might make that pig playable. That's obviously, that's not even like that great of a turn 4 play. I mean, it's a 7/7 with Haste and Trample. You're just booping your opponent, but and you still have that in play, assuming they don't kill it. But you're not getting like full effect of its +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample for the rest of your team. But what I'm alluding to is that this card is not hard to enable, not hard to like turn on to get the mana effect, and it ramps you a lot. So there is like endless possibilities that you can, even if you miss your land, you still have 7 mana. That is so much mana to do with whatever you want. That is 2 spells in a mid-range list. That is a big spell. That's a Nexus of Fate if you're going that far, right? That's a Nexus of Fate on turn 4, which is dumb, by the way. But there's just so much you can do with this card, and because you're able to produce that much mana, and because you're going to be, that can allow you to be able to put a lot of pressure on your opponents with powerful cards just coming out just left and right. Dude, just drop a Carnage Tyrant on them. Just drop, I don't know, any card. Like that's insane. Like what you can do with this is limited by your imagination. You can drop a Sunbirds into play. Right? Sunbird's Invocation. If you're trying to get wacky, do some meme things, this is how you're going to enable your memes as fast as possible to get under counter spells, to get them onto the battlefield before you die, to the aggro lists. This is how you're going to do it. You just need to figure out the most efficient way to do it. Again, please help me figure out the most efficient way to do that, because my Timmy heart will love you forever if you will help me out with this. I am excited to play with this card, and that's why it's number 5. It's our halfway point on the list. So, number 4 on our list, assuming you make it to turn 4 with your Incubation Druid, is a huge payoff for this Druid, and that is Hydroid Crassus. For X green-blue, it is a Jellyfish Hydra Beast, which is the best creature type. Let's be real here. A Jellyfish Hydra Beast, it says, when you cast this spell, you gain half X life and draw half X cards, rounded down each time. It's got Flying and Trample, and Hydroid Crassus enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So, going back to our previous card, the Incubation Druid, let's just Magical Christmas Land here, you untap with it on turn 4, and you have your 8 mana, you pay green blue, and then 6, you cast your Hydroid Crassus, you now have a 6/6 flying trample, jellyfish Hydra Beast, you have gained 3 life and drawn 3 cards. This is on turn 4. That is bananas and very, very good. This card, without the Incubation Druid, is still very good. It's a very good late game card to help the green decks reload, to help you just get back into a game, gain a little bit of life, provide a little bit of cushion. But even if you cast this for 6 mana, X equals 4, you're still gaining 2 life, drawing 2 cards. That's still good. Like a 4/4 flyer with trample is not small. For 6 mana, it might be a little small, but like it's very, very, very good. The gaining life and drawing cards make up for the lower power and toughness, right? For the 6 mana. Anything after 6, when you get to 8 to 10, I think this card is insane. And like I said, so because Incubation Druid exists, because there are other ways to ramp in the format, this card can get out of hand very, very quickly. And I think that you will again see some sort of teamer mid-range list that I'm sort of working on, maybe, popping up in the format and doing a lot of very, very fun and exciting things. This card has the potential to be a comeback mechanic, to be a way to lock your opponent out of a game, to sort of put that final nail in the coffin. You cast this for your 8 mana, you put 8 mana into it in your mid game with your green ramp deck, and all of a sudden you're drawing 3 cards and you're gaining 3 life, and you have a 6/6 flyer that your opponent has to answer in addition to whatever else you have going on the board. This is a big threat, and it's worth noting that this doesn't have to resolve for you to gain the life and draw the cards. When you cast this spell, that is very important templating for players to remember. When you cast this spell means that when you put it on the stack, your opponent can essence scatter this. It can be countered. If you paid X equals 6, you're still drawing 3 cards and gaining 3 life. This card is powerful and is something that you should be concerned about if your opponent is casting it, especially if they get a bunch of mana. If that when people are untapping with Incubation Druids with +1/+1 counters on them, you need to be thinking about what they can do with all of that mana that they're about to have. And this being one of those things that they can do is pretty scary. I'm very excited to try and make this card work in the format. Again, I think if you haven't figured it out, I'm sort of leaning towards Teamer for the archetype that I want to be working on. And this card is going to be in that list, and I'm very, very excited about it. Because for many reasons. Not only am I a Timmy, but I am a Timmy that likes to draw cards. I am excited. Like, Colossal Majesty is something that I tried to make work. It didn't, because that enchantment is not that great. But man, did I ever want to just cast big dumb things and be rewarded for it by drawing cards. This is a big dumb thing I can cast and be rewarded for it by drawing cards without having to have some dumb enchantment in play, and that makes me excited. So, that being, this, like I said, this being number 4 on the list, we're getting into those powerful cards, and I think this is one of those powerful cards that you're going to have to watch out for going into the next format and beyond, because this is something that is really going to get your opponent back in the game if they're behind, gaining them a little bit of life, drawing them a few cards, or it's just going to close out a game on you, and you're really going to get wrecked by it, especially if they are tempoing you out with Frilled Mystics as well. So, yeah, look out for this card, guys. I think this is a big one. And you know, the rest of the cards are going to be, we're sort of ramping up in power level here. So going into the next card. We're sort of taking a step away from the green theme, the green blue, green red theme here, and we've got Kaya's Wrath. For white, black, 4 mana, we have destroy all creatures. You gain life equal to the number of creatures you controlled that were destroyed this way. What's important to note here is that this is a Wrath. They put Wrath in the title to sort of just let people know what this card's going to be doing. Destroy all creatures. You gain life. If you lose any of the creatures, you gain life equal to the number of creatures you lost by this card's effect. It's been a while since we had a 4-mana real board wipe. In fact, I think the last time we had a 4-mana real board wipe was Supreme Verdict in the previous Return to Ravnica set, when that stuff came out. So Kaya's Wrath is insane. This is scary, right? This is the reason that I think, one of the reasons I think Esper is going to be pushed into the forefront because it's going to have a very, very powerful board wipe. In addition to the powerful removal it's already got, still got Contempt. It's still got Esper gets Teferi. With a light splash of blue, they get access to Syncopate. They have Quench. They can still tempo you out with those counter spells. They don't have to be heavy blue, right? All of those counter spells require just 1 blue. Not to mention they're already, like I said, I've mentioned multiple times, they're getting access to Hallowed Fountain now. We've got Godless Shrine. They're sort of set as far as mana is concerned. They've got Glacial Fortress. They've got Isolated Chapel, right? They have everything that they need to make their mana base work with a light splash of blue. And Teferi only costs 1 blue mana, and all the counter spells I mentioned only cost 1 blue mana. So it's not difficult to imagine a world where Esper is playing those tempo counter spells and huge, powerful single target removal spells, and this being a board wipe coming down early on turn 4, potentially gaining them life if they're playing any creatures. I don't imagine that they will be playing any creatures, but if for whatever reason there's a control deck that plays creatures, this is going to gain them a little bit of life. Now, it's no Fumigate, right? They're not gaining a bunch of life for every creature that's lost, but this coming down a turn earlier, I think, makes it a little bit better than Fumigate was, which is kind of scary to think about because Fumigate was really hard to beat for some aggro decks. This card is very powerful. Again, I think this really pushes Esper, or maybe if there's like a weird Abzan control list with like Vraska being the win condition. I can't imagine that right now, but if there is, maybe I'm missing something or not thinking about it. I really think that this could enable some sort of control archetype with a powerful 4-mana Wrath. This is one of those cards that like really freaks me out, and the reason it made it on this list is because it's so powerful. It's above the Crassus because this is something that we haven't seen for some number of years, and the fact that Wizards feels comfortable putting it in this set means that, you know, we're looking at some archetypes that are going to be very powerful, because this is a huge boost to Esper control lists, or like control lists in general, right? So like I said, this, maybe even Mardu, right? Mardu is like, we've got some weird Rakdos cards that are control-y as well. So I mean, this card is bananas, and I'm personally, I'm concerned about it because, like I said, like I mentioned, the green mid-range list that I'm trying to play is weak to sweepers and has a hard time reloading. So like I said, those enchantments that I pointed out previously will help me reload after I get swept by Kaya's Wrath. That's almost certainly going to happen. But going forward, so the next card on our list we've got. So the next card on our list that we've got is going to be Electro Dominance. Now this is a card. Oh my goodness, this is a card. X red. This is the second X spell on my list. It's an instant. It says Electro Dominance deals X damage to any target. You may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. And I'm pausing here so you can think about that for a second. You can cast a spell from your hand that is the converted mana cost is X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So let's just say you're playing a control deck, like Jeskai is a control deck that exists right now, and it's not uncommon for them to get 6, 7, 8, 9 mana in play. Late game, if they Electro Dominance you, and it resolves, they Electro Dominance you, let's just throw a number out there, let's just say 6, right? 6 is a mana cost. That's 8 mana, end step, just 8 mana, bolt you for 6. They can cast something for 6 from their hand for free, and one of the primary cards that I'm thinking about is Niv Mizzet. Like, just giving Niv Mizzet flash, in a way, letting it enter the battlefield. It can't be countered. It is worth noting that the spell that Electro Dominance does put into play, it doesn't put it into play, it is cast. So it can be countered, which is relevant, but Niv can't be countered. So when Electro Dominance lets you cast it for free, it's going to resolve. Just giving Niv flash is spooky. Now, maybe you're playing a green-red deck, and Carnage Tyrant also can't be countered, so in a way, Carnage Tyrant gets flash, and that's kind of dope, but that's not relevant. We're talking about the spooky control decks right now. But like I said, so to sort of flip this around, and I sort of already just gave away my punchline for the green-red deck that I'm maybe working on, is that you can give Carnage Tyrant flash and hit your opponent for 6, or kill a relevant Teferi for 6, or kill a creature like a Doom Whisperer for 6. Right, 8 mana is a sweet spot. Getting to 6, putting in Niv Mizzet for the control decks, putting in Carnage Tyrant for the green-based mid-range lists, putting in anything. Right, X equals 4 still gets you sweet creatures. X equals 5 gets you sweet creatures. X equals, anyway, whatever. You're getting something sweet off this no matter what. If you get to cast like a I don't know, some sort of draw spell. Imagine insert draw spell here. The fact that the spell is free for X or less means you're going to get to kill something that's relevant, or hit your opponent's face, or kill a planeswalker, and then cast another spell for free. These cards that have that effect stapled to it, casting something for free without paying its mana cost, is spooky for me. Like, because sometimes crazy things happen. If you think about, like, this is like a one-shot Sunbirds from your hand. You cast this spell, you kill a creature, you hit your opponent, you kill a planeswalker, and then you get to Sunbirds. You know, you get that extra free spell from your hand, which is sometimes backbreaking. And so this card, again, we're really ramping up in power level here. This is going to enable creepy plays from like control decks, like spooky plays from control decks, and very, very spooky plays from some of the bigger green mid-range lists, right? Being able to flash in a Phoenix, like a Rekindling Phoenix, or like a Ripjaw Raptor. These are not particularly powerful creatures, but like when you add flash to them, when you're able to, in combat, for 6 mana, kill one of your opponent's creatures and put that Ripjaw Raptor into play, or put that Phoenix into play and just blow your opponent out in combat, is big. Like that's a big play from the green-red mid-range list, right? That's just, you don't see it coming, and then all of a sudden there's something in your way you didn't even see, and you lost another creature, and then your opponent's drawing cards off their Ripjaw, and there's just, oh man, this card is, I'm excited and concerned to see like what people end up doing with this card, because it's one of those cards where it's just like, it's pretty powerful, very powerful. So we'll see how it goes, and you know, people have already been spooked out. Like, this is the card that like gets banned before Nexus of Fate, before Teferi. This card gets banned because it just lets you do all these other spooky things very, very fast, very, very freaky things. I don't think this card's gonna be banned. I don't think any cards are gonna get banned. Realistically, like we're moving into a very powerful format. I think Kaya's Wrath. I think that Electro Dominance. I think that the Mana Dork that ramps you insanely. It's just like, Wizards is signaling, like, hey, we're moving into a powerful format. Get ready for decks to do dumb things, right? And that's typically, like, if you played in the most, back in the last Return to Ravnica set, like, block, that block did a lot of powerful things, and we had things like Sphinx's Revelation and Supreme Verdict from the control decks. We had a lot of wacky cards for the mid-range lists. We had some Thragtusk Restoration Angel, like, just dumb things for the mid-range lists, and it was kind of wild. But all the decks were very powerful, which made that format very, very fun. And I think that's where we're going with this set. Electro Dominance, while spooky, I'm optimistic that it won't be so broken that every deck is playing it, and every deck is getting free spells, and you need to have a plan for when your opponent gets to 6 mana, gets to 8 mana, right? But this card is very powerful, and it is, like I said, it is worth noting that the second spell is cast, so you do get cast triggers. So if there's something else that you cast that says when it is cast from your hand, for example, Zakama. I'm not saying anybody's ever going to Electro Dominance you for 9 and then put Zakama into play, and when it's cast from their hand, they get to untap all their lands, then do something else stupid, like Electro Dominance you again. But oh my god, that's so wild. That's a dream right there. We're gonna do that on stream sometime. That's the dream right there. Naya Electro Dominance. So like I said, we're going to a fun, powerful format. I'm optimistic that this card won't be broken, and that we will be able to figure out the format and just have, like, break it wide open and have a lot of fun, crazy different archetypes going on in the format. I'm really excited about it. So moving into our last card. Actually, before we get to our last card, we have an honorary card. We'll call it like the meme card. It almost made the list, but it is like the memeiest of meme cards. And that card is actually going to be Mirror Match. So this is, in every set, they print that one enchantment where somebody's like, I'm going to do dumb things with that. And this is that card. This is that card, everyone, that people are going to do dumb things with. Mirror Match is a 6-mana enchantment that says, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of your next end step. So, what can you do with this? Well, you can cast cards that have haste or that give things haste and get copies of them. You can cast, for example, End-Raze Forerunners for 8 mana and potentially get 1 copy or 2 copies or 3 copies. Who knows how many copies you're going to get. But when you cast a card like End-Raze Forerunners, other cards that I'm coming to mind are like Regisaur Alpha, giving all the other dinosaurs haste, including the original one that you cast, haste. Dumb things can happen, and this is just a meme card. You're going to do dumb things with it. It's really exciting. ETB effects, like even just casting like Jade Light and getting like 3 Jade Lights is dumb. A bunch of Explorers, a bunch of land draws, and stuff like that. This is a fun card, and I'm just like my honorary meme card before we get to our final card and my most anticipated, most excited about card on the list, which is, you had to see it coming, it is Domri Chaos Bringer. This card and this alternate art are amazing. I am so excited about this card. It is a Planeswalker for 2 red-green, so 4 mana in total. It's a legendary Planeswalker Domri. It's got alternate art. It's very sick. I really like it. But it's +1. It's got 3 abilities. Its +1 is add a red or a green mana to your mana pool. If that mana is spent on a creature spell, the creature gains Riot, meaning that it can enter with either haste or a +1/+1 counter. But it's worth noting that this mana doesn't have to be spent on a creature. It's just if you spend this mana on a creature, it gets Riot. So you can play it on turn 4 and plus it and still have that mana, that red mana, to shock a creature, or to, you know, protect yourself with like a Llanowar Elf. Like, Llanowar Elf's not really protection, but you can put a body in the way. It's worth noting that it has 5 loyalty initially, so even just plussing it up to 6 is a big boost. If you're lucky enough to get your opponent with an empty board, it's -3, says look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them and put them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's potentially a draw 2 if you're building your deck with creatures in mind that you want to put and give Riot to. This is a very, very good Planeswalker against a control deck, just drawing 2 creatures, like showing your opponent 2 creatures. Look, I had these creatures, and giving them Riot, which means haste against the control decks, which means +1/+1 counters in the mid-range mirror. Is huge. Now, I don't really evaluate Planeswalkers on their emblems. And this particular emblem is not nearly as powerful as Domri Raids, but the -8 says, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of each end step, create a 4/4 red and green beast creature token with trample. Eventually you will get there and win the game with 4/4 beasts that have trample. It's going to take some time, and the emblem is actually not that hard to get to if you think about it. It starts at 6. Like, it starts at 6 loyalty if you're upticking, and then you've got 7, 8, so 3 turns afterwards, you're looking at embleming, which is kind of spooky. It's kind of spooky, but really what I'm excited about is giving my creatures Riot. This enables things like Sarkhan's Unsealing, because the creatures will enter with that additional +1/+1 counter on them. You can take anything that has 3 power and bump it up to 4 to trigger the Sarkhan's Unsealing, giving relevant creatures haste, like Carnage Tyrant, like my Jadelight Rangers, like my Crassus, getting an extra mana for my Crassus, my Hydroid Crassus, just getting extra mana. This also puts a +1/+1 counter on my Incubation Druids when they enter the battlefield. So this is what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at Domri, and just what it's enabling the green-red mid-range lists to do, the teamer mid-range lists to do, is get those +1/+1 counter synergies with Incubation Druids, with Sarkhan's Unsealings, bumping up the power, getting the haste on creatures that I need to get in with, Carnage Tyrant, you know, Phoenixes, that sort of thing, and it's -3 being able to draw me cards when I need to. This is such a good Planeswalker for these mid-range lists that I'm looking at building. I showed you a bunch of creatures that I'm looking at putting in my lists, and being able to ramp helps me get to that big pig. Oh my god, I really hope that Domri can help me get to that big pig in conjunction with Incubation Druid. I'm really, really hoping that that's the secret, that's the key. Oh my god, do I want to cast that big pig. But if I can't, casting a Hydroid Crassus for 6 counters and drawing 3 and gaining 3 life is good enough for me. Putting an additional +1/+1 counter on it, making it 7. I'm so excited. So this card, not only, so Domri, when he was printed in the last set, Domri Raid was my favorite Planeswalker. in the green-red in the Naya mid-range lists from yesteryear. His art was great. This art is great. I really just, if you can't tell, I'm a huge Timmy, so like a Timmy Planeswalker is just so excited about it. So I'm kind of like, I'm kind of getting really excited about it just because I'm so happy with the art, the way this looks, and like what it might enable me to do. I hope that you guys are excited, or as excited about Ravinca Allegiance as I am. These 10 cards are what I'm looking to either be playing or be scared of. Kaya's Wrath, spooky, but these are the 10 cards that I'm most excited about. Tell me what cards you guys are most excited about in the comments down below. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you did. If you like this format, please let me know. Other than that, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.